Welcome everyone to Almost Cancelled. I am Peter, and today I'm going to be talking about Severance Season 1, Episode 1. It is called Good News About Hell, and it is the first episode, so I'll start spoiler free and give you a warning before I go into the spoilers. This is a new show from Apple TV Plus, and it stars Adam Scott, who works in a very unusual work environment, which is, the whole first episode's kind of about setting this up and explaining this, and I saw the trailer a while ago. I don't remember how much the trailer revealed necessarily. I just remember the trailer feeling weird and having a weird vibe. And that definitely carries into the episode. But effectively what the premise of this show is that the people who work at this company, at least in this one department, the Severance department, on the severed floor, as they call it, effectively have their minds split. And when they're at work, they don't remember who they are in the real world. And when they're in the real world, they don't remember anything that they do at work. They don't remember. So they effectively become two different people. And when they're at work, they're wondering, do they have a family? What is their life like? Do they have a loved one? Do they have kids? They don't know those answers. They're not supposed to know those answers. The idea, from a corporate sense, is that the work-life balance is completely unique and distinct, and you're not thinking about stuff at home when you're at work, and then when you leave work, you don't know any secrets from work, implying maybe there's a reason to keep it all secretive. But the show introduces this in a very compelling way, I think, from the start, which is a new recruit who wakes up at this place and doesn't know who she is. And we get the weird voice of Adam Scott over this, comm system, try to speak to her. And then it that leads up to the title scene sequence, which then cuts back to, okay, here's Adam Scott's side of this. Let's see him going to work. Let's see what his day at work is like. And then the second half of the episode, we get to see his real life more so. We get to see him outside of work. We get to see what is his personal life like. That's kind of the makeup of this first episode. And I will say that I liked it quite a bit. I thought it was a very interesting premise, and if anything, I thought it went further in episode 1 than I thought it would. There's a couple of things that I kind of, I wouldn't say I figured out necessarily, but there was a couple of themes and ideas that I thought it was setting up, and I was surprised to actually hear it be vocalized in the episode before the ending. It does have one final little swerve, which is maybe it's not a bad swerve at the end, but it's probably the weakest thing they introduced to me, just because it felt very predictable compared to everything else. Whereas the rest of the show, I thought had style. There's a lot of really interesting cinematography in this. They do a really good job of giving you that boring, bland, overly clinical corporate building. A lot of really white rooms and walls and cubicles and long, windy hallways. At the start of the episode, when he's going to work and he's still his personal self, and the character's named Mark, when he's going to work, there's this great shot of him walking to the building, and the way the car park is kind of laid out, it's perfectly symmetrical, and the building's perfectly symmetrical as well. And then when he goes into the lobby, the way all of the waiting chairs are situated in the lobby are also perfectly symmetrical. And to the point where it all feels very unnatural, where it feels like nothing in the world is this perfectly designed or symmetrical. There's imperfections. So the fact that it is this perfect is a little bit unsettling. And I think it had that going for it throughout a lot of the show. And I think what I like about it is there's a quirkiness to it. Obviously, there's a sense of humor to it, and discovering what this place is the first 20 to 30 minutes of the episode is really just what is this place? How does this Severance thing work? And we get this idea that everyone working here doesn't remember who they are in the real world, right? And one of the main plot beats early on is that someone who Mark is friends with at work doesn't work there anymore, and that's who's being replaced with this new person. And the new person, Helly, she is very hostile at first because she thinks she's been kidnapped and doesn't understand where she is, why she is there, and it the way it kind of sets out these things, you really understand it by the end of the episode. It starts off in a very mysterious place and it's oh, what's going on? And I think you start to piece it together just a little bit ahead of the episode, just enough that you feel like you're engaged because you're putting the puzzle together yourself, so you feel active in the storytelling. But it doesn't then take ages for them to get to the point. It actually does then quite quickly they sort of confirm things and they make it really solid. There was definitely a few things, like I said, where I thought they weren't going to like vocalize specific things until later. And there's definitely a point in the episode where you could, I think you could have ended this episode about 15 minutes early. And I'm not saying it's too long or that it should have ended 15 minutes early, but I think what they teased about 15 minutes from the end, I actually thought was a perfect cliffhanger, because when you sort of thought about it for a second and realized what it probably meant, it was a really tantalizing little thing. But then it kept going, and then the actual ending was a little bit less interesting. But that's a fairly, it's mostly just a nitpick, really, in the grand scheme of things. You know, the Apple want their shows to be more or less a full hour. Fair enough. That's what we get here, and it's a 9-episode season. I don't know if this is billed as a limited series or if it's like designed to go further, but I enjoyed this first episode. I think Adam Scott's performance is quite. It's good, you know. He kind of fits this. It's almost like he's taking the type of character that he's played in something like Parks and Rec, and he's kind of putting this this, I don't want to quite say satirical, but this spin on it, which is a bit moodier. It's a little bit more nuanced, and when it starts hinting at what his real life is like, and you start to wonder, okay, why would someone, and this is all willing, these people aren't tricked into doing this, they willingly make this choice to have this procedure done, effectively creating a work version of themselves that never gets to leave work. Like, you know, like they turn off when they leave, and then they turn back on when they arrive at 9 a.m. the next day. And so that personality never gets to leave work. They are, in essence, trapped at work forever. They never get to experience the freedom of outside. And one of the interesting ideas that kind of like started poking in my head throughout the course of the, and it's kind of hinted at in the episode, there's a couple of things that sort of tease at this, but what if it was hell? Like, and I'm not just saying that because of the title of the episode, but like, what if it actually is hell? Like, what if they mistreat their employees? What if you are completely miserable at work and you're put through this turmoil of just absolute torture? Maybe not literal torture, but what if they are so mistreating of you, but you would never know to fight it, and you would keep putting yourself back in? Because there's a question that the new recruit asks Adam Scott early on, like, you know, like, I have no choice, I'm just like here forever. And Adam Scott says, well, no, if every time you find yourself back here, it's because you made the choice to come back. But interestingly, the version of yourself that's making that choice has no idea what your life is like at work. So it could be the worst thing ever that you would want to leave. Like, you might be, like, your work self might hate the job, you might be mistreated, you might hate your bosses, you might be in a hostile environment, and you want nothing more than to leave. But once you leave the work, you don't remember any of it. So your life self is effectively aiding and abetting the continual torture of this other part of yourself. You just don't know that the other part of yourself is going through hell. So that's a kind of an interesting concept in and of itself, and the emotional side of things I think is very interesting. Like, why would someone make this decision? Is it because they don't want to remember something in their life, and that's why it was appealing in the first place? That's kind of hit on this first episode. So I would recommend checking out Severance. The first 2 episodes went up today on Apple TV Plus, but it is weekly from here on out. And I think I'm going to watch more. I think, you know, like, it being weekly is a big help, because doing the binge shows is a really tough call. Obviously, I have to fit in episode 2 before episode 3 next week, but I think I'm on board, at least to check out more of this. I never even mentioned it's directed by Ben Stiller, who is, you know, I've seen a few things he's directed before, and this is definitely one of the more stylistic things I've seen him direct, you know, because he's done a couple of comedies and stuff that aren't necessarily showpieces for direction, but everything about this show is very designed, especially in the workplace. I mean, even some of the stuff like the street he lives on in the real world is, you know, it's very uniform and its like layout and stuff. So there is some of that does bleed into the rest of the world too. But like the company itself and the design and everything in there is very, you know, clinical and overly perfect, but also like a bit of a maze at times. Like where they actually work with when they're sitting at their desk doing their job, it's basically just a couple of dividers, and it's like 4 desks in like the middle of a big room. So there's a room for like a whole floor of people, but it's only just these 4 guys, or 3 guys and a girl now, who work in this central part of the room. So it all feels very disconnected and cut off, which makes sense given the themes of the show. So Yeah, I think the direction and design is pretty on point. It's given me a fun little vibe, and it's kind of like it's obviously it's prodding at really science fiction ideas and really science fiction concepts, and the way it handles character drama and looking at like how characters deal with things. But at the same time, compared to maybe other like cerebral science fiction stories about characters and what they're going through and like unlocking the truth in their mind and whatever else, you know, whatever way you want to phrase it, I would say that this does have slightly more of a. I said quirky already. Quirky is probably the best word. I think maybe there's. I'm just trying to think if there's a better word to sort of describe kind of just the spin that it has on its tone versus something that's more like, I don't know, gritty. It's not gritty. It's just more like satirically. So, I guess you know it's not I'm not saying it's like RoboCop, right? I'm not saying it's like so far in that kind of sort of like overt satire, but there's a bit of satire in here and there's a bit of quirkiness. And like I think like the upbeat piano in the soundtrack at times kind of like gives you that vibe as well. It's got just this like it's almost like it's the sanitized version of satire. Like even the satire is going through the company PR line a little bit, but very intentionally so. So it has this kind of vibe, and I think that works for what it's doing. So I'll give the spoiler warning so I can actually talk about like how it does a few things and stuff. And you know, there's a couple of other actors in here that's worth mentioning. Patricia Arquette's in there as a notable character. I had no idea that John Turturro was going to just show up as one of the other workers in the show, so he was a pleasant surprise. Yeah, so I mean, the first half is very much like we see Adam Scott. You know, his character Mark is not in a good place before he gets into the building. We see him in his car, and he's like crying. He looks a bit disheveled. But when he goes into the workplace, you know, he goes to his locker, he switches out all of his key card, his shoes, everything, and it's when he goes down the elevator that he like his facial expression changes. Like something in that elevator triggers the change, and then he's like this slightly more upbeat, happy to be at work guy once he's down there. But they keep referencing Petey, who's like someone he was friends with. He was, you know, as the guard or the superior who's walking around. He says, "Oh, you were my favorite workplace friendship, so it's a shame Petey's gone." And Patricia Arquette is Peggy. She is this like very like not monotone, but very just non-expressive boss who like when they basically say he's got a promotion because he's taken Petey's old job because he was the head of the department. She says a handshake is available upon request. That is the way she phrased it. There's a lot of little jargon like that to make it sound extra corporate. When Adam Scott's doing his like sort of orientation interview with Helly, so we see, you know, it opens with her and like where is she, what's going on. When we come back to her later, because it's what Adam Scott's doing like this in his day of work, and we get to see the rest of it, and he comes in and speaks to her. He's got a folder, and like one of the little things that's different is that the opening, his voice over this little speaker system sounds very ominous because he has these big long pauses. He just is like, "I'm going to ask you 5 questions. It's a survey. We'll be free to chat after the survey. Should we start with question 1?" And he kind of repeats it a few times, but he has long pauses. It feels ominous. It feels like some sort of serial killer or something is talking to her over the comms, kind of, right? It's got that kind of very ominous vibe, like he's the villain. But then when you actually see the other side of it and you see him in the control room with John Turturro, the reason why there's all these pauses that make it sound really like kind of ominous is because he's flipping through like a big folder that's all indexed and it's all laminated because he's basically trying to flip to like how to respond to certain questions she's giving. Like what's the protocol? Everything has a protocol. Everything has a subsection. Everything has, and he's flipping through it and he's trying to get. So you get this very different perspective and tone to this scene when we see it from his side, which is that he's not this ominous mastermind. He is a worker who is trying to who is scared of doing the wrong thing for his boss, and it's very clerical and it's very mundane. I mean, he's tense because he's worried about not doing a good job, but it's very mundane stuff that he's doing. But Yeah, and ultimately they show her a video of herself saying that she's doing this of her own free will, and explaining to like her work self that she's not been kidnapped, she's not whatever. This is where you work now. You just won't remember anything of the real world when you're in here, and that kind of does the trick. There is a weird moment before that though, where she tries to leave, and Adam Scott shows her to a door that leads to a stairwell. But when she goes through the door, it's kind of like one of those flip around things where she just ends up walking back into the same hallway. And Adam Scott's notably not allowed to see this. So I don't know if it is actually possible for them to leave, or if it's just a case of like they can basically always break them down, because ultimately the real person in the real world will never remember that they've been mistreated, so they have no reason to not just torture them effectively until they say, yeah, okay, I guess I'll just start working here then. So that's interesting. So all these like little details are fascinating. I'm sure there's some that I've glossed over. But the bigger, more interesting things to me is, once we come outside and he actually sees Helly outside when he's in his car, and they don't know each other. So it kind of further just kind of establishes that and shows you those weird little moments. It's good to give us those moments early on to just kind of like, okay, this is how it works. And he goes home. We see that he lives alone. He's kind of miserable, because I was thinking, does he have a family? Like, does he have like a whole personal life? And he seems quite sad and miserable. There's eventually his sister shows up, who's pregnant, and says, hey, come to this dinner thing. But it's not dinner with dinner. This is the thing. All of her husband, seemingly, and most of his husband's friends are all like these new age people who believe in having dinner without dinner because the food restricts the actual unlocking of conversation or some bullshit like that. And there's a lot of like hoity-toity language, and like they're talking about ideas, but it's all a bit fluffy. Like one of the women at one point says the line, because the sister even makes fun of her later when she's talking to Adam Scott on his own, where she says, oh, I'm not quite getting the was it the veracity? What was the veracity? It was another word with a V. But it was just the way she was talking, and she was trying to sound smart and like intellectual about what she was saying, and it came out sounding really stupid. And another moment where one of the guys is talking about, Mark, Adam Scott's character, used to teach history at school. And he's like, oh, you're a teacher, so what's your thoughts on this? And he says, oh, well, I mostly just taught, it was history class. I mostly focused on World War One. And the guy like says, oh, I was just reading a think piece about World War One and how it would have been a faux pas to call it World War One. They actually called it the Great War. And what's funny about this is that immediately as soon as he said that, I like made a face, because I'm like, wait, what are you talking about? The reason why I didn't call it World War One is because there was no World War Two yet, so why would they have any reason to number it? That's why they called it the Great War, because and Adam Scott like immediately just sort of like very deadpan says that. It's as nice as he can, but you can tell he's uncomfortable. A lot of the times in this scene where he's trying to speak, like people just start talking over him, which especially gets frustrating for him, I think, when the brother-in-law character kind of like reveals, because he mentions what company he works for now, and they start talking about it, and they start asking about what he does, and is it secretive and so on. The joke being, of course, he doesn't know anything about it because he doesn't remember. And the brother-in-law reveals that he's went through Severance. So this is a thing that people know about. It's a controversial thing that maybe isn't like super practiced, but some companies are doing it, so it is a topic of conversation. They understand what it is, and they all start like sniping these opinions about it, and he can't answer any questions without them interrupting him, like constantly. He never like has a chance to actually say his thing, and it's a really interesting look this type, and I feel like thematically the idea that like all these types of people being around them in the real world is kind of is going to play into something. Like I feel like there's a theme here with these characters like that connects to the overall themes of the show, which I haven't quite like landed on yet. I don't think. I'm going to have to like see more episodes and think about it some more. But the idea that he is this like worn down in real life and can't get a word in is certainly an interesting tactic. I mean, his relationship with his sister's quite good. Like he's still miserable about her, and about the fact, because they imply a couple of times of getting over something. They eventually mention his late wife, so he has a wife that died, and immediately I'm like, oh, this is really interesting. So this is what it's about. He accepted this severance thing because he doesn't have to remember his dead wife for 8-9 hours a day, and that's the appeal of it for him. And this is like an unhealthy way of him dealing with his trauma. that immediately made this like premise really interesting to me. It was like, okay, we're doing stuff with this now. It's a cool premise on its own, but now you're giving me the meat of the character stuff. You're giving me why this is worth exploring. I was actually surprised because when he's talking to his sister later, who is very apologetic because she's aware that quote unquote dinner was torture for him, and this is the irony, is that she's like making fun of it and like apologizing for putting him through it while she's making him a sandwich because they didn't have anything to eat because it was this new age thing where we don't have the food gets in the way of the real conversation, man. Bunch of that bullshit. So I mean, I suppose you could compare it to the fact that the workplace thinks that their real lives get in the way of them doing the work. So this is a bunch of assholes who think like actually having dinner at dinner gets in the way of just the intellectual conversation, and a lot of the intellectual conversation is nonsense fluff. But anyway, so she actually says, I was surprised when the sister actually had a line here where she says that you're not going to your therapist anymore. I don't think forgetting about your wife for 8 hours a day is like healing. And I thought, oh, I'm surprised they actually vocalized that directly this early. I thought that was something that we could sort of like, that we could just sort of like get from like what was going on a little bit. I'm not really complaining necessarily. It's just I was surprised when she just outright said it like that. I thought that was going to be a bit more subtexty for a while, but no, she hit with it, and he kind of avoids like he doesn't really respond to it all that much. He kind of just zones out and just stares at her. He tries not to emote very much. It's actually a fun little jab because she says to him to spend the night, and they have this nice house. It's in like it's very remote. They're surrounded by snow in the forest, and he's going to sleep in the upcoming baby's room, right? So the baby to be. And again, the husband's this kind of new age weirdo and says that, because he's put him in this little race car bed, which is still too big for a baby. It's not a crib. And there's also like a double bed in the other side of the room. And Adam Scott eventually asks, what's with the 3 beds? Like, what is the purpose of this? And the guy says that, there's studies that it's traumatic for a child to switch their bed out as they grow. So by presenting them with all of their beds, like up until they turn 18 at birth, they can then choose to move between them at their own pace, which sounds like absolute nonsense. And the reason why I'm even telling this part is because it really popped me the next morning when he's talking to his sister, and she mentions that he smells like a distillery. He's been drinking. He's like, so I'm sorry, I had to drown out the traumatic memories of our parents forcing us to switch beds as kids. And like her response to it is quite good, because she just sort of says, you've been sitting on that one, because it was a good line, and it was a good line. It made me laugh because it was such a good snipe at how ridiculous her husband is. But it made me laugh. But the big thing, the moment I actually thought the episode was about, I genuinely thought the episode was about to cut to black, was in the middle of the night. He gets up for a drink and he sees someone in a business suit in the forest. Like, he sees someone sort of like behind a tree. He goes out to check it, and he sees someone, a middle-aged man in a business suit looking back at him. And I thought the episode was going to end there, because I thought, this is a perfect ending, because I realized who this was. This is Petey. This is the friend from work who disappeared, and clearly he remembers things. Like, this Petey is now remembering both sides of his life, and that's presumably what's led to him leaving or being fired, or maybe he's on the run or whatever. But he's coming to see him, and it's great because they've established that Adam Scott, that Mark would not recognize him. He would not know him in his real life. So it's just this mysterious stranger to him. But like, I think we get it as an audience. So I was actually shocked there was another 10-15 minutes of the episode. Like, I really thought this could be it, right? This could be your hook. Because I thought it was clear that this is what it was hinting at, but it does keep going. And he goes to dinner the next night, and Mark, he's sitting there, and then in comes Petey and sits down, and Petey actually tells him who he is. So it goes further than I thought it would in the first episode. I thought you could have saved this for episode 2, but he tells him that he's had the severance thing kind of done, removed. It took a lot of work because it's supposed to be permanent. And like, you know, he says that we both tried to like voice our concerns at work, we both wanted to leave. He says that, which makes me wonder if like Mark at some point, did they reset his memory again perhaps, and he doesn't remember what like earlier stuff from work. I mean, it didn't seem like that earlier in the episode because it felt like he remembered the in jokes and stuff, but he, you know, obviously he's completely kind of like dumbfounded by this. He's confused. He understands what he's saying to him because he doesn't know where he works. He doesn't know the procedure that he's went through, so he's not completely confused by what he's saying. But there's little touches in the performance here from Petey where when Mark says, "Are we friends?" he says, "I'm your best friend. You're my very good friend," which was a nice little kind of like, you know, like friendly jab at him. It kind of felt like, okay, there's a bit of a natural thing here, like, but it was only coming from one of them, and that's kind of interesting. But he gives him a card, like a birthday card for a niece, but it says, you know, if you don't want to look any further into this, if you don't want to know any more, then you can, you know, just ignore this. But there's an address on the back. If you want to start answering these questions and what's really going on at the workplace, then go here. And this is interesting to me because this is, you know, it's very easy to compare this to, you know, like an Alice in Wonderland thing. It's very easy to compare it to the Matrix with the red pill and the blue pill. Like, this is the moment of choice, right? And there's definitely some similar themes to some of these works. It's not one to one. I'm not saying it's exactly like the Matrix, but the core idea that we're all designed in the Matrix to be a part of this overall machine, right? We're cogs in this machine. That's kind of what this Severance thing in a way has done for the workplace. It's like people have opted into being these cogs in the machine, but they don't know what's going on there. So there is kind of an awakening vibe to it as well. The ending though, the hook at the end, which is perfectly okay. Like it's not bad. It was the least interesting like reveal of the episode to me, is that his boss, Patricia Arquette at work, is actually his neighbor that he's been kind of trying to like contact all episode because she keeps using his like spot for the bins to be picked up or to be emptied. And at the end of the episode, like, it's really obvious it's about to reveal something because like it doesn't show her face, like it's all from behind. So you kind of like know who it's going to reveal. There's only one possible person it could reveal, and sure enough, and it seems like she does remember things though. She intentionally says something contradictory to something she said earlier in the episode. In the workplace, she said her mother was an atheist. Here, she says her mother was a Catholic. And I was wondering, like, does she have different personalities here, or is this a case of she is intentionally, like, she does have all her memories, and she is testing him. And her facial expression at the end of the episode before it cuts to the credits would imply to me that she does remember everything, because her like fake neighbor smile fades away and she becomes the stern boss lady again. So it's an alright, it's an alright reveal. It does make me wonder though, because I don't think this is coincidental that she's his neighbor. I think this is intentional on their part. I think they want to keep an eye on him. The question I have is he always been important to them, and that's why she is specifically living next to him? Is she moved there recently because things have gotten weird with the other guy, and because they're worried about the severance procedure being reversed and other employees? Are they worried about some sort of uprising? Because obviously it makes sense that he was close to Petey. Maybe Petey would come and speak to him, so maybe he is a person of interest in terms of keeping an eye on. But like, it seems like she was already living there for a while. So was he always important to her specifically, or the company specifically? What is the specific interest that dates further back than that? I'm curious. So that's something to look into. But honestly, I think the tease of Petey in the forest would have made an even better ending of the episode, though. And I think it's because it let me sort of piece some of it together, because you see this mysterious man in the business suit, and it's like, oh, that's a bit random. Oh wait, it's not. That'll be the guy who we've not seen yet, who's like his friend at work who's left. And all the doors that opens, because it's like, oh, he remembers now. And this is going to be about Adam Scott over the course of the season, presumably starting to like unlock things or starting to remember things, and how that like then leads to him either dealing with his trauma of his real life like loss, or how it leads to whatever. So like, there's a lot of really interesting ideas in this show, and I do think some of the character stuff it's exploring is really interesting. I think Adam Scott's performance is pretty good. I think he's kind of perfect for this, actually, because he is a little bit different to the type of actor you normally put in your more cerebral sci-fi show. I think the fact that he does have kind of a, you know, like office guy look to him does help immensely to this. And I think I'm getting to see a different couple of, you know, I'm getting to see some different levels to his acting ability that I normally don't get to see, because he's normally in such comedic stuff or such dry stuff. This is kind of using those skills but kind of mixing and matching them. And you know, I feel kind of his indifference to things, I feel kind of his misery in certain moments, but he still comes across as natural at a lot of points. So then it's really like almost a little unsettling to see him be happy-go-lucky at work and, you know, be the company man. I think the performance is doing a lot. And then there's some other actors in this that I've not even seen yet. Dickon Lackman, or Deachin Lackman. I always forget how, I don't know how to pronounce her name, but she was in Dollhouse, and she was in, what was that, Altered Carbon. She was in season 1 of that, which wasn't very good, but like, I like her, and she's apparently in this as a Miss Casey, but I've not seen her yet. At least I don't think I saw her this episode. If I did, then she was disguised or something, because I didn't recognize her. But I'm looking forward to seeing her pop up. And yeah, so intriguing sci-fi show so far. I'm looking forward to checking out more. So expect episode 2 at some point in the next, I don't know how soon. I've got a busy weekend. I suspect it'll probably be early next week, and then I'll have episode 3 on release day next week. But yes, that is Severance. It is a pretty interesting show so far, and I hope it keeps it up, and I hope it sticks the landing. My only concern is that it is, as it explains more stuff, that the mystery is taken away, and it's not necessarily fulfilled with good sort of unraveling drama about what it means for the characters. I hope that stuff lands and that stuff sticks, because then it'll be special. But we'll see. There's only one way to find out, and we'll dive in. So, and I enjoyed the direction quite a bit. So that's good stuff too. So let me know what you thought of the first episode of Severance in the comments below. You can like, subscribe, ding the bell for notifications and all that stuff. You can get me on the Twitters at mailed_fuzz for channel updates. You can get me personally on Twitter at Wibble89. And of course, you can support everything we do over at patreon.com/mailfuzztv for as little as $1 per month, and keep all the bonuses coming. So thank you once again, or keep all the content coming, I should say. You get some bonuses, but keep all the content coming. But thank you very much once again for watching or listening. I always appreciate it. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?